Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
No problem. I'm Dave Hagewood. I'm the owner and founder of Psyonix and the current CEO.
Awesome. Current CEO makes it sound like you're leaving.
Currently, I am the CEO. How about that?
How did you first start programming, I guess? Where did you start?
Programming. Wow, we're going way back. I think I was like 6 years old. My dad brought home a TI 99 4A and a book about how to type in computer programs, and I started typing them in and playing. They would always have games in the back, so that's what I wanted to type in. I cheated a little bit. I made my mom type some of it in because it took so long. But then I started learning how you could change things, and it would change the game, and I was addicted at that point. Pretty early.
What type of games did you change? What did you do?
Like there was one. Like these were pretty simple things. Like there was a little sprite of a guy who was like dancing back and forth, and I'm printing the code and looking at it, and I could see the array of zeros and ones that would make up his pixels. So I remember that like sort of aha moment when I'm like, oh, I could just change this, and I could turn him into a dog or another kind of character. It was awesome.
So modification was something you were doing from a pretty early age.
Yeah.
So I guess when you progressed into your teens, tell us more. Like what else did you sort of modify, or what else did you code?
Started making simple games, learned C. I made some Tetris clones, Tron Light Cycle, a bunch of stuff like that. Then getting into college, I used all those programs to like opt out of all the computer science classes, which I kind of regret because those are the classes I would have made straight A's in. So. Maybe not the best plan, but it did work.
So when did you start modding UT then? Was that like within that company?
Yes. So I started modding UT at that time. I did try to use another engine, I guess you could say, called NetImmerse, which ended up becoming Gamebryo. And it was very, very Spartan. It was very basic. And when I started working with Unreal, I realized, oh wow, all the stuff that you need to make a game is already here. And they had, what they called total conversion mods, where you didn't leave really anything existing of the current game that you were modding off of. You just you started from scratch basically and replaced all the characters and all the weapons and everything. It was a big shortcut. And for a team that was as small as ours, there's a handful of people, 3 to 5 people probably. That was really the only path.
What are some of your favorite total conversion mods or like mutators for that early UT?
Oh man, I was really into a lot of the UT mutators. Was one I think I always get it mixed up with the Quake version. I think it was called Excessive though, and it just made everything like you fire like 5,000 rounds per second of everything, and it was just chaos. And you can probably tell from our games that I like chaos.
So was it that company then that did the modding on Unreal Tournament 2003? Like, talk about that.
I've always been the same company all the way through. So after having some limited success, trying some major total conversions and things like that, I'd been attending some game shows and particularly GDC. I knew that Epic was interested in having vehicles in their game. I was really a big fan of Halo at the time. I thought mixing vehicles with a first-person shooter was the greatest thing ever. I'm like, why couldn't I do this to UT? It's a smaller chunk of something, as opposed to us trying to make a whole new game. So we basically made a game mode. It was codenamed Vehicle Mod. And we just put vehicles. We basically did the same vehicles that Halo had, the original 5 vehicles. Like there was a tank, and there was a plane, and there was a hovercraft, and showed it to them like the next GDC, and they were blown away. They were like, "Oh my God, this is great! We want you to come and work on this with us." And I said, "Can I move to North Carolina? I would like to would you give me office space?" And they're like, "Absolutely." So. I basically worked out of Epic and kind of moved the company there, although I think it was just me and one other guy at the time. And we worked out of their offices and like employees almost, which was great because I got that inside scoop on what Epic was doing and learned all about how the real game companies do it.
Right. And then I guess the game the mode that you made was it Onslaught for
Yep,
04?
that was Onslaught. Yeah, so it ballooned into a much larger team as I got there, and a lot of people from Epic, a lot of people from the community that they'd hired to come in and work on it, and it was an amazing time because we were kind of siloed off from the rest of Epic in a lot of ways. We were in one great big room. We called it the UT 2004 War Room. And I still have this giant banner that we put up on the wall that says UT 2004 War Room. And that way of game development sort of inspired the entire way that I've been trying to, continue since then with Psyonix as a studio. That just kind of open room, collaborative, creative environment. There wasn't a huge amount of deadline pressure. We were all just coming up with the coolest things we could and throwing them into the game as fast as we could.
Excellent. So I guess how did you come up with the mode of Onslaught? Because vehicles in a game, you can kind of go in any direction.
I was inspired by PlanetSide, actually. I don't know if you can see the connection, but I knew I wanted vehicles in the game, but I wanted a more interesting game type. And I like this idea of territory control. And they had this cool idea that like you couldn't take over a territory until you'd taken over the previous territory. So you have this kind of moving battlefront that goes on. And that's where I came up with the node system. So you'd you'd have to capture one node and destroy its power core before you could possibly attack the next one. And yeah, that was where it came from.
Yeah, and I guess utilizing the link gun in a way that hadn't been sort of used before.
Yeah, I think that was an idea from one of the guys at Epic. It might have been Steve Polge, to sort of integrate more of the UT kind of mechanics into that and use some of their weapons. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Tell us about some of the vehicles in that mode, because they're super fun.
My favorite was the Manta, because you could crush people. You could fly over them, and then like we put this force in that would just smash down. And it was very important to me that all the vehicles were very physics-based. Like there was no faking of any physics. It was just forces and wheel physics and tire physics and things like that. So I really liked the Manta because you could fly off cliffs and you'd just be flying in the air, just soar down. You could smack people, and then we made them like jib all out in the fans, and that was pretty cool. We had the tank, which you could destroy people from really long range, and that was a two-person tank. You could have a guy in a machine gun. We had the Raptor, which was our sort of fly all over the field kind of vehicle. And it was another reason we needed that territory control system, because you have these vehicles that are so mobile that you could just go to the end. So we had to have this sort of system where it made no sense to go to the end. You have to build your way. Build your way to it. There was some really hilarious stuff. Like the most famous map on that, of course, was ONS Torlin, and it had that great big tower in the middle. And it was amazing when the game came out to watch people play and figure out somehow how to get like one of the tanks on top. By like, they would drive a tank on top of like 4 Raptors and somehow slowly and surely take it all the way to the top. And that kind of like emergent gameplay is just what game developers live for. It was the most amazing thing.
What was the name of the car with the blades at the side?
Oh, the Scorpion. Yes. Yeah. I don't remember whose idea it was to make those blades, but that was pretty awesome. Just ching, and then you just mow people down. That was really great. And then we had that weird sticky gun that it would shoot at the top that would, little bubbles that would stick to things, and then it would just go like a chain reaction.
Yeah. It always seemed superfluous that like this car that can run people over also had blades.
Yeah, why not,
Like when the bots, especially when they were in that gully, and they were just running down, you just like drive down and pull out the blade.
That's one of the things I think I really enjoyed about UT was like there really weren't any rules. Like you could do almost anything. Like I like future and I like fantasy for those reasons, because you don't have to stay within realistic constraints. You can kind of just go where the fun is, and that's sort of a theme of mine, at least for the studio.
Yeah. What's it like now, looking back to 2004, when like Onslaught's kind of the defining mode of that game? Like when people think about UT 2004, they go, oh yeah, that was like big maps and going on Torland and like yeah, like all these crazy, vehicles and whatnot. What does that feel like now?
Onslaught was really a proving ground for me. It was really my big break and my big sort of like, oh, I proved that I can do this and make something really popular. It was a collaboration with Epic, and as such, Epic got all the credit for that, and I that makes sense. But for me, it was kind of that moment where I had created something really amazing that people liked. I'd established that, and it was something I could build off of. And that's what really caused us to say, okay, I want to build Psyonix into something, independent. I want to make an independent studio and build on this success.
So how did that transition happen then? Right after 2004?
Yeah, we did there was an Editor's Choice Edition, which was kind of the expansion pack. We added a few more vehicles. Some of my favorite vehicles actually were in that expansion pack. They had the vehicle with the shield on it, a vehicle that lobbed like from really far distance artillery shells, and another version of the plane called the Mosquito. I don't know, it's been so long.
Did you play Unreal Tournament 3?
Yeah.
And
I actually worked on that a little bit.
Oh, really?
Because after we transitioned to our own studio, they kept contracting us back for vehicle work and so on. But I didn't have as much to do with the modes anymore. But that expansion pack was actually a really important time. So me and Ben Beckwith, who still works with me, we're doing a lot of work on that. And one of the things that we did in that mode was we were coming up with cool mutators. And one of the mutators was a map called ONS Tricky. And it was just a big obstacle course. It looked like one of those monster truck rallies with a stadium and just dirt ramps and stuff like that. And he and I were really into like snowboarding games and skiing games and stuff where you do flips and things like that. So we want to do it with cars, of course. Makes sense. And I've always been obsessed with cars that can jump. I don't know, ever since I played a game called Bump and Jump way back in the day, like arcade quarter muncher games. But I wanted to make the car jump. So we did the typical like snowboarding thing where you press a button and the car sort of like leans down in a way, and then you let go, and the longer you held it, the higher it flies up in the air. And then we made this complicated system for the mouse and keyboard so that you could flip and you could roll and you could try to get trick points or whatever. And we thought that was fun. It wasn't super popular in the game, but we had a lot of fun with it. It was immediately after that I started Psyonix up sort of proper and started hiring people from the local colleges. I moved out of the Epic offices, but we were kind of right down the street. And I couldn't hire people in the industry because they were like, who's Psyonix?
Right.
I said, no, I made Onslaught. They're like, oh, well, that's pretty awesome. But I'm going to go work for a really cool company. So I hired interns and just ran sort of a competitive internship and said, look, I know everything about Unreal Engine 3. It's coming out. It's going to be big. Big friends with Epic Games. They're giving me contract work. We're going to get, new licensees are going to come in because Epic doesn't like outsource expertise, and we do, and we're the only ones who know this. So for a while, we were basically the only real Unreal Engine 3 outsourcing studio that you could find, and everybody needed us because that engine was just exploding.
It's the most used engine that whole generation for like 10 years.
It was pretty big, and so I trained them all on sort of my style. And the neat part about that was I didn't get that like jaded nature some people get from the industry where they've been crunched to death and they're just like, oh God, what's the next game I'm gonna have to slog through? I said, games can be a lot more fun than that, and let's do it this way. Let's try to build a studio where we're not crunching ourselves to death. And we did it based on contract work, and I kind of made two rules. I said, well, we're always going to keep the company stable, so we always need to have work coming in that's kind of our base, but we always have to have somebody working on original content, because I knew that you go one way or the other, and it can be pretty dangerous. If you go total, like, we want everybody constantly burning the candle and making money come in, you're never going to be able to make your dream game. And if you just focus on your dream game, well, you know, I'd seen so many other studios try this, and you make your dream game, but you usually need 2 or 3 shots at that. And you blow all your money, and then you're out of business. So I'm like, let's do a hybrid. You know, we'll always stay stable, but we always have somebody working on it. And I'd seen other studios try this as well, and it was too tempting, and they pulled their people off of it, and you can't do that. You have to keep people on that. And the game that we kept it on was this trick game that you know, this trick mechanics with the vehicles that we kind of pulled from our work at Epic. And we didn't know what the game was. We just knew it involved cars that can jump and trick around. So we were playing around with that. We were playing around with cars that could shoot. So we tried like a battle game. We tried an obstacle course that was really difficult to get through. And there was one point it had a grappling hook. I mean, like some crazy stuff. We ended up with kind of that zany, you may have seen video footage of it, but it's the zany mode that we called Crash Course for a while. And then we used the name Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket Power Battle Cars because the game was so crazy. And it's kind of a lot like the Rumble mode that you have today, where all these weird weapons, we even had tornadoes back then. So, and the idea was you were on these platforms and you had to ram people and you'd knock them off the platform into the water. And that was fun. And you know, one of the guys, it was Adam Beckwith actually, the brother of Ben Beckwith who came with me from Epic. He suggested that we throw a ball in there because he was a real fan of another mod called Death Ball. Yeah. And so we're like, oh, we could try it. It would be a cool side mode. And then I don't think for the next 2 weeks we got any work done because we were just playing this game. And we were in the middle of Xbox Greenlight, actually. And they had just greenlighted the game after much negotiation. And we're like, we want to change everything. And it was just kind of like, what? And, you know, PlayStation at the time was actually being really open with their platform. Kind of like, you don't even, like, you had to have a publisher to go on Xbox. So we had that whole mountain to climb. And the publishers were looking at our game like, what? I don't get it at all. And we weren't making it any better by saying, okay, now it's soccer with cars. So we're like, well, PlayStation, we don't have to answer really to anybody. We can just make our own thing and throw it on there. So that's how Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket Powered Battle Cars came to be. First individual title that we had made all on our own. But at the same time, we were still working on all of the contract work and, you know, working a lot for Epic. We worked on Gears of War. We worked on UT3. Later, we worked on Bulletstorm. And then, you know, spattering of other titles, Mass Effect and XCOM, and yeah, lots of really cool stuff.
What type of work were you doing on those? Was it like multiplayer modes or like?
Oh yeah, so there were all kinds of things. In some sense, we could be a general. We were mostly doing code. It wasn't a lot of art, but in some sense, we were general purpose coding company. But we did start to specialize in a lot of things. We were really good at multiplayer, and we were really good at vehicles. So a lot of our work ended up being around that. And as we grew, we got a stronger and stronger reputation on the multiplayer side of things. We definitely became experts in that. So everybody who was doing a UE3 game that had a multiplayer side, that's why Mass Effect 3 came to us actually, is a good example.
So you didn't make the Mako in Mass Effect 1?
No.
You probably should have.
Yeah. And some of it was simple stuff, like the Mass Effect 3 was mostly just consulting, a little bit of work. And then others, like Bulletstorm, are like, make our multiplayer mode. So it varied a lot. And then when Nosgoth came along, that was a really big change for the studio because it wasn't so much like another dev team saying, hey, we need some help with this. It was a publisher saying, hey, we want you to make this game, you know, from scratch. You know, we have a design, but we want you guys to basically build it in your own way. So that was a big deal for the studio because it allowed us to expand a lot and build our art team in particular. and kind of become a really full-featured studio. And that was at the same time we decided to reboot Battle Cars into what became Rocket League.
So yeah, speak a little bit more about that sort of transition between Supersonic being this like, what was it before it was the soccer element was added?
Yeah, we tried a lot of different things because we had this motto, kind of follow the fun. We're like, let's not like design this on paper and just make it and then see if it's fun. Let's just start going in different directions. Let's have different people trying different things, and we know we like the car mechanics. We know that's fun, but what makes a game out of this? So we tried a lot of different things. Like Ben's a level designer, so he was making these crazy levels, and they ended up becoming obstacle courses where you drive on the sides and the ceiling, and you jump over things, and you're swinging through with grapple hooks and all kinds of stuff. Around that time, we invented the boost, which was a huge deal. And we really didn't know the cars could fly until we put that on there. Like, it wasn't like, we should make cars that fly. We put that on there, and then somebody goes, oh, look, because you can move the car in air, I can jump, move up, and then shoot upwards. And, a lot of teams might go, oh, well, that's a bug, we got to fix that. Right. But we were like, no, that's fun, so it stays. If it's fun, it stays, It's
like emergent game design.
Exactly. Emergent game design is a good way to put it. So, we like I said, we threw in the vehicles, we threw in weapons, and we threw in different things, and it was like a mishmash of stuff. But we kind of liked that. We liked the chaos of it. Chaos is a big thing I tried to put in Onslaught as well. Like, it's really gratuitous. Like, when a vehicle blows up, we'd made it explode multiple times, and then when it would hit the ground, it would explode again for no reason. But it was amazing because you're running around and suddenly this vehicle is spinning over you, exploding like more times than it ought to. And I love that. So I wanted to have that kind of craziness in the game because these are games. They don't, realism is one thing, but it's a game, and I just want to have fun. I want awesome stuff to happen. So we were trying to figure that out, like make awesome stuff happen.
And this was like while you were working on other projects, right? Are you kind of just working on this on the side?
So we were working on things like the Gears of War 1 vehicle, for instance. I don't know what else we were working on exactly at the time, but yeah, we were doing other project work. But I had a lot of the interns working on the battle car stuff because the companies we were working for didn't necessarily want interns working on their stuff, so I had them working on our stuff. And sort of cutting their teeth on that. But that's great because all of those guys, they're all still here.
Right.
Like, they're every one of them. And they were born in this game, basically, into the industry. This is their kind of first game and still working on it. So we know the hell out of this game. We've gone through every iteration. The physics have had so much detail put on them in the past 10 years, basically, since we've been working on it.
Yeah, because I was playing a bunch of battle cars last week, and in some ways it's so incredibly familiar, but in other ways it controls like a different game.
It's one of those subtleties that it's hard to tell how complicated it was getting in, because when it feels so simple that it feels natural, that there's usually a lot of complexity behind it.
Right. I have to ask about the name.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the name?
Well, we were very indie at the time, feeling very indie. And so we were looking for a way to stand out, and so we're like, I think part of me, it was inspired by a Conan O'Brien bit where he was talking about supersonic polka dotted rockabilly fighter pilots. I thought it was hilarious. So it's actually my fault. I said, what about supersonic acrobatic rocket powered battle cars? And we are notoriously bad at picking names because the company runs so democratically. Right. That it was just designed by committee disaster. Sort of like everybody had their own idea of what a good name was, and every other name sucked. So we had so much trouble, and I think we almost all settled on that, not because we all liked it the most, but because it was so out there that you couldn't really dispute it. Right. It was just, well, okay, maybe it'll work. Maybe people will notice it just because of that game. we didn't really think about the fact that people wouldn't be able to tell their friends about the game. They're like, I like this game. It's called something, Battle something, and you'll never find it. It's buried in the PSN store, but it's somewhere in there. So my marketing manager that we have now would roll over if I ever tried to make a decision like that. But so it was a little trouble, and the journalists didn't really like it either because they had to type it so much. We took some heat on that.
What was it like getting that out there? What was the reception like? Was there like a community around it?
Yes, there was a very strong community around it. It was a small community, but it was cool, I think, for them and us, because we were so passionate about the game that we wanted to know everybody playing it. So we built a forum system online, and we were talking to these guys, and we knew them super well. Guys like Kernovi, who was playing under his dad's name at the time, Steve Bills. We had no idea. But Gibbs, all those guys were there from the beginning, and we knew all of them. And we wanted so bad to keep making the game because we were like, wow, we have 1,000 ideas for how to make this game better. And we wanted them for ourselves because, we loved the game so much. I don't think there's ever been an example, and I've been to a lot of studios, worked with a lot of games. I don't think there's ever been a situation where I've seen a studio so in love with their own game as this one. And we just wanted to do right by ourselves, and we wanted to do right by them, but the money just wasn't coming in, unfortunately. We just didn't. It was hard to get it out there. We did a little bit of PR, but we really didn't. We were 10 guys at the time. We really didn't know how to do marketing, and esports hadn't really become a big thing. YouTube was even new. We were actually not the first, but I think the second, almost the first title to have automatic YouTube dumps of clips in games. So there's like a zillion clips actually on YouTube of supersonic acrobatic rocket power battle cars because of that.
Just hard to find.
Yeah, it's just hard to find because of the name. Yeah. But all that was sort of brand new, yet those were the features that make our game so cool. And Rocket League came at a time when all that stuff was just the right timing. But definitely we knew how to market games a lot better as well. So I could probably talk forever about like the reasons why this game exploded and that game didn't, because they really at the core are the same game.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. I definitely want to ask you about that. I guess after Battle Cars came out, what was the state of Psyonix then? You had this game, it had probably, I'm guessing sales-wise, wasn't a massive success for you guys? Like how
It wasn't huge. It did eventually make a profit, only because we spent so little on it in the first place, but it took like 2 years for it to actually make all of its money back. And that doesn't pay payroll. So we had to immediately go back. And in fact, it was a little bit of an emergency mode because I started to break a little bit of my rule. It's very hard to ship games. When it really comes down to like, we got to get this out the door, it's almost impossible not to be all hands on deck. So we started to, just for a little bit, broke my rule of let's always keep the company stable, and we just put everything into this, hoping maybe it'd be this huge smash hit. And it wasn't awful, but it wasn't immediately like dumps of money coming in. So we pushed the company to the brink really at that time. And we had to take some projects pretty quickly afterwards that maybe were not the most ideal terms, and were really rough on us. Like we had to push a lot harder than we normally did. We had to work a lot harder, and I had to do a lot less on the original game development side of stuff. We did a few updates for Battle Cars, but I decided to strongly focus on studio building at that point. I'm like, we need a bigger studio. We need more expertise in what we're doing. We're going to come back to this game. And we always knew that. We always knew we were coming back to it at some point.
How did you know that, considering you had just gone through this 2-year like ordeal with it that didn't pay off?
Everybody asked me that, but to us, the answer is so obvious. The game was amazing. It was indisputably amazing. Just people didn't know about it, Everybody we'd ask people on the street, we'd ask people at game shows, like, have you ever played this? We got two answers. I've never heard of it, or that's the most amazing game. You know, we never found anyone who like, oh yeah, I played it, and I'm like, or whatever, you know. So we're like, okay, we really have, clearly we have just a exposure problem, you know. We're not getting it out to enough people. So we knew that was what we needed to focus on next time, and we spent years just accumulating all the reasons that we could make this better.
So what were the things then coming out of Battle Cars that you guys kind of knew, okay, this is what we need to sort of change here?
We knew that the initial user experience could be a little bit tough. The game got hardcore too quickly, and one of the problems was the game was so successful at a cult level that
right.
new people would come in and they would get destroyed online. So that's a really tough problem when you have a small community. With Rocket League, we didn't have to worry about that because we have so many people that we can say, okay, matchmake all the noobs with noobs, matchmake all the good people with good people. At the time, we had the technology and the expertise to do it. We just didn't have enough people. There literally wasn't enough people. So you kind of got to get the ball rolling. It was another sign of like why we knew that the game itself was good. It's just didn't have all the elements that you need to really make it take off. So we're like, let's just polish this thing out. And all of the games that we were working on the contract work side are Unreal Engine 3, so they're AAA. So we built a AAA team. We were used to not working on indie games anymore. We were making the best games in the business. So we're like, let's take our indie game and let's put the best games in the business side of things on it. We need the polish. We need the user interface that we have. We need the matchmaking features that are up there with Halo and Call of Duty. We want everything in this game. And we had made everything before, especially on the multiplayer side, because that was what our expertise was. So we're, in a way, I think we like, you could almost say we overcompensated, but I wouldn't say that because the game was so successful. But there was this paranoia that if we didn't do everything we could put everything into this game we possibly could, it might have the same reaction that it did the first time. And I think that's why we just did the hell out of it. And people were surprised. They were like, this is a weird game, yet it has this polish that we haven't seen on a game so zany.
Right, yeah, completely. Was there, you sound very confident that you thought, you believed in the game. You believed that there was a game there that people wanted to play, but it must have been terrifying to basically be walking down the same road you did before.
Yeah, it was. We were there was always the question in the back of my head, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, and all of the original guys that worked on this game are all simultaneously wrong. But then you like kind of hit yourself a little bit. You're like, 10 people? We're all hardcore gamers. We're trying to sell to the same audience that is us. How can we be so enraptured with this game? So enraptured with it. Like I loved Onslaught and other games that we've worked on, but not like this game. Not this like addiction where we just can't wait to play test it every day. And then it never went away. Years and years and years and years. And we look at the guys playing Battle Cars. They're still playing it. They're still playing it. They're still playing it. Obviously, they see what we see. We know there's something there. And we're experts at game development at this point. We've worked on all these games. We've seen games fail. We've seen games be successful. And you start to kind of get a feel for the ones that really had something and the ones that don't. And it just seemed foolish to throw away something that was clearly, what everybody's looking for. This is what everybody's looking for. But it was hard to explain to people. It was hard to explain to consumers. It was hard to explain to journalists. It was hard to explain to publishers. You have to play it. So we focused on figuring out ways to make it where people had to play it.
Was the community for Battle Cars also sort of like saying, go for it, do it?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, if you read our forum posts, you can see like an archive of like, years of us sort of teasing, like, no, we're gonna make Battle Cars 2. We're gonna make Battle Cars 2. And everybody, I think they were all excited about it at first, and then it kind of been like, I don't know. I think we're just never gonna see it. It's vaporware, and we got a little bit tied up into mobile for a while. We thought, oh, mobile is here. we can make games with a smaller budget, and that's the way of the future. But we didn't do well on that because it's, we make AAA games, and we tried to put a AAA game on mobile, and people are like, it doesn't run on my phone. So we realized that wasn't for us pretty quickly on. But as soon as we got through that, we're like, we have to. If we don't do it now, we're never going to do it, and we know we all want to do it, so we're doing it, and we just kind of had to make that decision.
So I heard that Rocket League sort of went in different directions before it was Rocket League. I remember reading on Gamma Sutra maybe about how it was maybe an open world kind of thing as well. Like, tell me the directions that it went.
We questioned ourselves a little bit. Like I said, we were questioning like what it was that made it not take off. Was it just marketing, or is there more to it that we need to do? Do we need to really upgrade this game? I think we always felt that the physics should stay the same. But we did think, okay, we've got this big team. Maybe we should do something more grandiose. So we had this idea of like cars in this world driving around to different stadiums, and then you play a game, and then you could leave, and maybe you play other games. We thought, well, maybe we're putting too much focus on this soccer mode. Maybe we need some other modes, and we tried some different things or whatever, and they were okay. But there was nothing as amazing as that original concept. And Ben Beckwith, who I've mentioned a few times, he's amazing at building like terrain and like huge worlds, and so I think we were really enraptured by that. Like, it's going to be crazy, but the game was just way out of scope, and we've been around long enough to know when we're making that mistake, and it's a big part of a game developer's life is figuring out, you're out of scope.
Right.
This is just too big for us to bite off. I think it was some of the actual original members that had to talk me out of it in a way. They were like, this is too big. The game was good. Let's stick to it. Let's cut all this stuff out of it. We also thought maybe we need to make the game more realistic, like more to scale. There's this big question when Rocket League first came out, is like, what's the scale? Are these large cars or small cars? Is this a real world? Is it a fantasy world? And we decided to just kind of be like, you know what? It is what it is. And that was a big part of our decision to like cut all the stuff out that we were experimenting with and trying, and stick to what we loved, and just do a better job of it. Let's just make a better version of that.
Right. So there's no rich, deep lore in the Rocket League universe of these are autonomous cars with...
I wouldn't say that, but it's certainly not something we're divulging at the moment.
Now I'm fascinated.
Yeah.
Talk, I guess, before we get into, I'm going to get into sort of the launch stuff in a second. We talked about the name for Battle Cars, the name for Rocket League.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
We'd gotten a little bit better at understanding how difficult it is for us to come up with names. We had a brilliant marketing mind join the team, Jeremy Dunham from IGN, and we learned how to make really cool branding and logos around the game and so on, and we knew we need something catchy, we need something good word of mouth, something that was iconic, all the right ways of thinking about how to name a game, and then we limited the scope of the people who are involved. We took suggestions from everyone, but then we're like, okay, phase 2, less people, phase 3, less people, and finally narrowed it down, and the process was a very successful one. And it's funny, if you've ever had to name something, it's very tricky, because the first time you come up with it, it's always sounds terrible. It sounds good to the person who made it up, but it always sounds terrible to everybody else. I remember the first time Epic Games came in and told me, we're going to call the game Gears of War. I mean, just think about that. It's like the first time you hear it and you don't know Gears of War, you're like, that sounds weird. But then it takes like 2 weeks, and then you're like, oh, it's Gears of War. Yeah. So the same thing happened with Rocket League, and I had to really push on people that was going to happen. I'm like, you know what? I know not everybody's satisfied with this, but trust me, it fits all the description of a name that's going to sound perfect when you've had a little bit of chance for it to sink in, and that's exactly what happened. So that was a much more successful naming process.
Was there any other names that you left on the cutting room floor?
Yeah, some of them I can't repeat here. That's the other problem, is that people cannot stop coming up with joke names, and we had to finally start kicking people out of the room. Like, I'm sorry, no more puns, no more crazy stuff. I'm not sure I can even.
I remember hearing Soccer was maybe one of them.
Soccer, yeah. So we used to call the game Soccer, as opposed to before we'd even come up with supersonic battle cars. We called it Soccer, just because it was a silly pun version of the name. We were worried about how that would play in Europe, but and also it's a weird name. We were close. We were like, no, we need something more pro.
That's very worldly of you to pick. Which is because one of my favorite games ever is called Sensible Soccer.
Yeah,
it's a UK developed soccer game.
That's what made me think maybe it might work, because they know what soccer is, and I read the history behind that, which is always great when people do the whole soccer versus football thing. Is that soccer actually came from the UK?
Yeah, ASOC, Association Football.
Association Football. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Out of interest, are any of you soccer fans?
I am.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, you see my World Cup ball was behind me.
Oh yeah.
I'm a huge soccer fan. Mostly international soccer. I really love the World Cup. I follow the MLS a little bit. We don't have a team here. We might, though, pretty soon, hopefully. But yeah, I was always a player.
Right.
And it was just a sport I loved growing up. And it was interesting because like I said, the idea to bring the ball in was not mine, but I really latched onto it once it came in, and hopefully influenced the design in some ways to kind of make it a little bit more soccer-like. What I liked about it was that it felt more like when I'm playing soccer than if I play FIFA. Right. FIFA just is a simulation of something that you see, whereas in Rocket League you actually had to practice shots. Like you don't go in FIFA and just like practice a shot. Oh, no, I'm going to get it right this time. No, I'm going to get it right this time. That's what I do on the field. You get in front of a goal, you get a bunch of balls, and you try to hit the upper 90. And you do the same thing in Rocket League, and with our different training modes and so on. We kind of set the drills basically, and that's one of the things I think that makes the game so special.
Yeah, I remember I did an episode of my old show on GameSpot about that feeling, about this game does feel like playing football or soccer in a way that those games never did. I guess could you speak to that a little bit? Like when you played yourself as a player, like the idea of like dribbling the ball with a car and being able to like do keepy uppies and like even as a goalkeeper, like it's so familiar.
There's no so like in a real sport there's no cap, on like, oh, I figured out all the controls. No, you're never going to. Like you're never gonna be Messi, except a few people maybe. But realistically, there's this infinite ceiling, and you can always get better. It doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how long you play, you can always get better. And I love that about Rocket League immediately, is that the way we designed the physics and the way we didn't fake anything, we didn't make anything just automatically happen in a certain way. We didn't give you any help, really. You have to control the ball in a physical way. It just naturally made it perform in the same way that a real sport does, where you have to practice it. And your ball is just like a controllable foot, and you're moving. The car, and you angle it in different ways, and you've got to angle it just right in the right situation. You've got to measure how far the ball is coming in, and can you trap it? It's all sort of the same things, and I think that's what makes the game so have such a lifespan to it. You can continue to play it, and you will always get better.
Let's talk a little bit about launch. Mm-hmm. So, you talked about the importance of getting, bums on seats, getting people into the multiplayer lobbies to play the game.
Yep.
Was that part of the impetus to go with the PlayStation Plus thing?
It was. And we questioned it. We only questioned it because we were doing a beta. And we do the beta, and suddenly we give it to streamers, and suddenly there's this buzz about the game that we hadn't seen for the original game. We're like, wow, this is already looking like it's going to be big. So we're like, do we want to give the game away for free for a month? And I think it was that exact impetus that you mentioned that made me sort of come back to reality and say, you know what? Yes, we told ourselves that the most important thing for this game is to get it in people's hands. If people can play it, it doesn't matter what money we lose. If people put this game in their hands, they will realize it is the greatest game. And that's exactly what happened.
What was it like the days leading up to launch and launch? Like, how were you feeling about it?
I was super excited leading up to launch. You know, we were seeing in the beta, we were hitting these big numbers, and you know, joking about how high they could be, and it was like there was a lot of relief, because I knew that the game was going to make its money back. At least that was the big thing. Like, can we hit break even? And I think before launch, I already knew. I was like, okay, we're good on that. Just now, it's how far can it go? Leading up to launch day, and then servers melted. Everything was on fire. It was crazy. We were making phone calls and doing everything we could, but we thought maybe 40,000 people at once, maybe 50 if it was awesome, and we got 150,000 people playing at once.
How soon after? The day of?
In the first week, I think we hit that. And it just smashed everything. We were like, wow. We didn't, like, you have to write things at a certain scale. You have to build things. You can't just make it infinitely scalable. You can scale within, you know, 50,000 to 150,000 or 150,000 to 1,000,000, but you can't make something that'll scale to either 0 or infinity, you know. And we realized we aimed for this, and we needed to aim for this over here. So that was a real tough time, because we basically had to work 24/7. I mean, we were, I kid you not, at one point my wife, while I'm sleeping, is in the style of the TV series Lost, is literally having to press a button every 15 minutes that like resets something. I don't even remember what it was, but like she would let me sleep while she pressed this button.
What would happen if she didn't press the button?
The servers would go down. They would literally go down. It was that bad for a while. We were hiring people like crazy. I was
press the button.
Well, maybe to fix the fact that we had to press a button. But yeah, I was bringing people in, interviewing them, and being like, okay, you got your laptop? There's your desk.
All right.
And so it was a simultaneously like frustrating and a super exciting time, because we knew things were really taking off. But the big fear looming over us was, could this be so bad that it all goes away?
Right.
Yeah. Fortunately, I think, you know, we survived. I think most companies do survive that. You usually survive the popularity. But I'm impressed with what the guys, I don't take any credit for this, but I'm very impressed with what our online tech team was able to do to basically rewrite the entire scalable backend in about 2 weeks and get everything up and running.
That must have felt like a decade worth of work. Like, when that game came out, did it feel like finally people were playing the game that you've been working on?
It was indescribable. It was indescribable. I don't know. I'd probably have to like win the Super Bowl or something to feel like that again, because if you can imagine for 10 years trying to explain to people that your car game with soccer is the best experience that they're missing, and trying to explain that whole, like, it's like playing a real sport and all of these things, they don't make any sense until you played it. They don't make any sense. It's just, you cannot just convince people. They have to play it. And because they hadn't, nobody, you know, would believe me. And then when suddenly all these articles come out saying the same things I've been saying, like, it's actually a lot like if you're playing real soccer, you know, and I can't stop playing this game, and it's actually my favorite game of all time. I don't know what happened. It was so vindicating, you know. It was absolutely amazing. Best time of my life, probably.
Right. Do you feel like your opus is behind you in a way?
No, it's just my first opus. No, I'm very much like I did that, it's amazing, it's awesome, I'm on to the next thing.
Right. Let's talk about, I guess, what you did then to sort of, was there a worry that you had all these players that you basically hadn't monetized? Like, yes, it's great that they were playing the game, but also, like, whoops, did we just throw all this down the drain, all this cash that you might have gotten?
I questioned it. It was there was a time for a while after it first came out, because it was free on PlayStation, but we were getting sales from Steam and they were killing it. I mean, we were just top of the charts. And just looking at all those PlayStation players going, man, thinking like, it's doing too well on PlayStation. It broke all their records. And then we're like, okay, there's going to be nobody left on PlayStation. We're literally doing the math of like how many people have a PlayStation and how many have this game already, because there's nobody else left to buy it anymore. And you know, Sony had always told us like, no, that can't happen. It's never going to be that way. But we're looking at the numbers like, I think we've really hit a significant portion of the PlayStation audience. And to be fair, afterwards, sales really did kind of track with about the number of new people who bought new PlayStations. So, but it kept doing well. It kept doing better and better and better as we go on. And now that I look back, it's very easy for me to say that absolutely was the best decision. That, you know, we make more now than we did at launch every month. So you look back at that and you're like, okay, well, that was 1 month. It doesn't even compare to like what we're doing now. So absolutely, it was you know, I think you can almost objectively say that it was a good idea at this point.
Did the amount of people that come on and the sort of both the scale of the community and also the sort of maybe impetus to monetize some of these people as well, did you guys change your sort of your DLC, your free DLC, and then your like paid for stuff because of that, or did you maybe expand it because there was more people playing? Like, talk about your kind of the next year of what you guys were doing with the adding ice hockey and basketball and all that sort of stuff.
So we always had the theory really that we just wanted to keep people playing. You know, that was what we loved about it. We knew that the hardcore players, the guys who were really competitive, they didn't need much, honestly. They were making their own game. But that's like the vocal minority. The majority of people who play are more casual players. They're the guys who get together in their dorm room and play a few rounds of split screen. So we had these two audiences that we wanted to care for. And even though the competitive scene is much smaller than the casual scene, we kind of look at them equally. The reason is these guys pull in these guys. These guys hear about these guys, what they're doing and all the amazing things they're doing. Like Reddit was huge for us. And part of the reason was we had all these guys from battle cars, you know, the Kernovi and the Gibbs and guys like that, that were doing these amazing things and putting up animated GIFs on Reddit. And they were like, oh my God, there's a whole new level to this game. I can't tell you how many times people said, you can fly in this game? I've been playing this for a month and I didn't know that. And so they really feed each other, but they're very different. They want different things. So we didn't focus on what would make us money. We knew that would just come. And I think that's the right way to look at things. We focused on what will support these players, what will keep them going, man, Psyonix is awesome. Thank you for giving us, this is exactly what we wanted. So we listened to them. We you know, they probably think we don't read all of their posts. We read everything. We read everything that people write. Most of it we already had on our backlog anyway. It's just a matter of prioritizing things. I wish we could be faster at it, honestly, because people get really excited about something, and then we get excited too, but it takes us 3 months to make it. Right. And by then they're like, oh, finally, Psyonix does something about it. No, like we immediately were on that. You just had no idea. But yeah, you got to cater to those too. So you've got things like Rumble Mode. It caters to the casual audience really well. And you got things like spectator support for esports and all of those features. That caters to the competitive guys. So we try to balance those two things and make sure that people continue to play. It's kind of the same way people look at free to play games. It's all about engagement. Even though we had no in-game monetization, which we have now, but you know we didn't for more than a year. Yeah.
Was the Rumble mode like a sort of a weird callback to your original design doc for this?
It had some inspiration, but it was done by a completely new designer here who hadn't, as far as I can know, hadn't ever even played that. So that was interesting, but I think it still had a lot of influence from just the Psyonix way of doing things. Kind of anything goes. craziness, but we wanted everything to still be very physicsy and so on. But it was, we took a little bit of the handcuffs off. So for competitive, we're very protective of making sure that the game is fair. It's got to be fair, or there's no esport there.
Right.
With Rumble mode, we're like, well, let's give them, especially the casual players, something where it doesn't have to be fair.
Yeah.
It's like Mario Kart, the blue shell. It doesn't have to be fair, it's still fun. That was really the motivation behind that. It was a much bigger success than we actually thought it would be.
Was there any sports that didn't make it in? Because you got ice hockey out and then you got the basketball stuff?
We've tried some other sports. I think some people have even found a few in our code in places because everybody's hacking the game now. But some of them may appear later, so I can't say which ones they are, but we're always trying other sports and other things to see what works. But the thing is, we're not going to put something out just because it looks kind of like another sport. It's got to be fun, you know? So until we figure out a way to make it fun, then it doesn't go.
Were the ice hockey and basketball, were they in that sort of, that idea for the open world thing where you go to different stadiums?
No, actually, ice hockey goes all the way back to original Battle Cars. We tried an ice hockey mode. We didn't have enough time to put the appropriate amount of time into it. But this time we had a lot more time and resources, and we made it work in a way that I was really impressed with, because the first one didn't work out. But try again.
How scalable is Rocket League? Because obviously we're a year plus from launch. It's had so much content added to it. Like you said, you've now got the sort of the chest unlock stuff in there as well, which has expanded that out. How much can you add to this before it gets too top heavy?
You got to be careful. Some of the directions we're going in now are trying to expand what we consider the core game experience and just make that more fun and giving you a lot more. There's a lot more cosmetic type stuff that you can do. There's definitely, we want to keep putting out casual modes that are fun for a while. We're not really trying to create new esports with them though. It keeps people coming back to the game and playing and engaging and so on, but you're right, it is a balancing act where if you dump too much stuff in there, you obscure it, and it doesn't have the purity that the game currently has. So we're very aware of that, and we're always trying to protect that.
Is there an idea is there a Rocket League 2, or is this like your platform that you're going to be working on?
At the moment, it's our platform. It's a successful platform. It has a huge number of people. There's no reason for us to mix that up. We're going to kind of wait and see how it goes. That sentiment may change at some point. Just like in the way that we follow the community and figure out what they want from the game, at some point maybe that's something that everybody wants, and it makes sense. I think right now, though, it makes sense to keep building on what we already have.